She stared at the pregnancy test strip in total disbelief in her cramped West Virginia bathroom, watching two pink lines materialize like a death sentence written in her own biology. Her hands trembled. The test clattered into the sink. How? The word came out strangled, barely a whisper. How can a virgin be pregnant? But the lines didn't fade. They stared back at her, unforgiving and impossible. Scientific. Absolute and true. Outside her apartment window, the gray November sky pressed against the glass like something trying to get in. Inside, Zariah's entire world tilted on its axis. Everything she knew about her body, her choices, her carefully constructed life, it all became noise. Because somewhere in Seoul, 6,000 miles away, a man she'd never met was about to learn that his last chance at an heir had been planted in the wrong woman. And when Kim Taesun discovered mistakes, people didn't just lose their jobs. They disappeared. Welcome back to Mafia Love Story, where danger and desire are never far apart. This is a tale of mistakes, fate, and a love that should never have existed. So dim the lights and let the story begin. 3 weeks earlier, Zariah's life had been beautifully ordinary. She worked the evening shift at Mel's Diner off Route 9, slinging plates of gravy-soaked comfort food to truckers and late-night regulars who knew her by name. The tips were mediocre. The hours were long. But it was hers. Every dollar earned, every choice made, every dream still within reach. At 26, Zariah was in that strange purgatory between youth and the rest of her life. She had a degree in mathematics from a state school she'd paid for herself, working 2 jobs through every semester. She had student loans that felt like concrete blocks tied to her ankles. And she had a plan. Always a plan. By 30, she'd be a financial analyst. By 35, her own consultancy. By 40, enough money saved to never worry about rent again. The plan didn't include miracles. It didn't include fairy tales. And it definitely didn't include Seoul, South Korea. But her best friend since college, Han Suyin, had insisted. Just 2 weeks, Suyin had begged over FaceTime, her round face bright with excitement. Come visit me. You've never left the country. You're always working, always planning. When do you actually live, Z? Suyin was Korean-American, had moved back to Seoul after graduation to be closer to her family, and had been trying to lure Zariah across the Pacific ever since. They'd bonded in undergrad over late-night study sessions and a shared obsession with K-pop, specifically a boy group whose posters still decorated Suyin's childhood bedroom. I can't afford it, Zariah had said, which was true. I'll cover your stay. You just need the plane ticket. Please see. I miss you. So Zariah had done something wildly out of character. She'd used 3 credit cards, maxed out a promotional 0% interest offer, and bought a round-trip ticket to Seoul. 2 weeks. Just 2 weeks to remember what it felt like to be spontaneous. Seoul had been overwhelming in the best way. The city never slept. Neon signs in Hangul blazed against skyscrapers that seemed to touch the clouds. Street food vendors sold tteokbokki and hotteok on every corner. The subway was immaculate, efficient, a feat of engineering that made Zariah's mathematician brain light up with appreciation. Suyin had taken her everywhere. Palaces with curved roofs and painted beams, trendy cafes in Gangnam, karaoke rooms where they'd screamed lyrics they barely understood. On the 10th day of the trip, Suyin had shown her a flyer. Look at this. There's a women's health clinic near Itaewon running a promotion. Free routine checkups for tourists. Completely legit, they're trying to build international clientele. Zariah had raised an eyebrow. A free pap smear? That's your idea of vacation fun? When was the last time you went to a gynecologist? Zariah had gone quiet. Healthcare back home was expensive. She'd been putting it off. Exactly, Suyin had said, smug. It's free. It's convenient. You'd be stupid not to. So Zariah had gone. The clinic had been sleek, modern, all chrome and frosted glass. The staff spoke English. The paperwork was minimal. A nurse had handed her a clipboard, and Zariah had filled out her information, checking boxes about her medical history, her cycle, her sexual activity. Virgin. She checked that box without thinking twice. The examination had been routine. Clinical. Forgettable. She'd thanked the doctor, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and efficient hands, and left. She'd thought nothing of it. 3 days later she'd flown home. Back to her crappy apartment with its leaking faucet and peeling linoleum. Back to Mel's Diner and the familiar weight of her financial planning spreadsheets. Back to reality. And then her period didn't come. At first she'd brushed it off. Stress. Jet lag. Travel always messed with her cycle. But when the second week passed and her breasts started to ache, when exhaustion hit her like a physical force, When she started Googling symptoms at 2 in the morning, a cold dread settled into her bones. So she'd bought the test at a 24-hour pharmacy, hands shaking as she paid cash, avoiding the cashier's eyes like she was buying something illegal. And now here she was. Pregnant. Impossible. She picked up the test again, held it under the bathroom's fluorescent light as if different angles might change the result. 2 lines. "This isn't real," she whispered to her reflection. "This isn't happening." But her reflection didn't answer, and the lines didn't fade, and somewhere deep in her mathematician's brain, Zariah knew that numbers didn't lie. Something had gone terribly, impossibly wrong. The email arrived at 11:47 p.m., 3 days after the test. Zariah was still in her work uniform, sprawled on her second-hand couch, laptop balanced on her knees as she researched. Researching what she didn't even know anymore. Immaculate conception. Medical anomalies. Lab errors. Anything that might explain the unexplainable. Her inbox pinged. The sender was from the Seoul Women's Health Clinic. The subject line was in Korean, but her email client auto-translated it. Urgent, medical error, immediate contact required. Zariah's heart stopped. She clicked. The email was formal, sterile, terrifying. "Dear Ms. Bennett, we are writing to inform you of a critical administrative error that occurred during your visit to our facility on October 23rd. Due to a chart mix-up, you may have received an incorrect medical procedure. We urge you to contact our office immediately at the number below. This matter is time-sensitive and requires your immediate attention. We sincerely apologize for any inconvenience and concern this may cause." Her hands were shaking so hard she could barely hold the phone as she dialed the international number. It rang 4 times. A woman answered in Korean, then switched to accented English. "Seoul Women's Health Clinic, how may I help you? This is Zariah Bennett. I just got an email about a medical error." What happened?" She paused too long. "Please hold, Ms. Bennett." Background music played tinny, incongruous K-pop that made Zariah want to scream. Then a new voice, male, older, tight with controlled panic. "Ms. Bennett. My name is Dr. Kong Tipsa. I'm calling regarding a very serious matter. Are you somewhere private where we can speak? I'm home. Alone. What the hell is going on? Ms. Bennett, I need to ask you a question first. Have you experienced any unusual symptoms in the past 2 weeks? Nausea, fatigue, missed menstrual cycle?" The bottom dropped out of Zariah's stomach. "How do you know that? Ms. Bennett." His voice was grave. "During your visit to our clinic, your chart was accidentally switched with another patient's. You were not scheduled for any invasive procedures that day. However, due to this error, you received an artificial insemination procedure meant for another woman." The words didn't make sense. They bounced off her brain like bullets off steel. You're saying you? You were inseminated with donor sperm?" "Yes. I cannot apologize enough for this catastrophic error. The staff member responsible has been terminated. But Ms. Bennett, this situation is extremely delicate. The sperm sample you received belonged to a very private, very powerful client. He cannot know about this mistake." Zariah couldn't breathe. The room was spinning. "You got me pregnant. You put someone else's sperm inside me without my consent. I understand your distress. We are prepared to compensate you significantly for this error and fly you back to Seoul immediately for a termination procedure, all expenses paid, with additional financial settlement for your pain and suffering. But this must be handled discreetly. Our client. I don't care about your client." Zariah's voice cracked. "You violated me. This is assault. This is." "Ms. Bennett, please understand the gravity of what I'm telling you. The man whose sperm you carry is not someone who tolerates mistakes. If he learns about this error, everyone involved, including you, will be in danger. He is not a forgiving man. He is Kim Taesun of the Kim Dynasty." The name meant nothing to Zariah. "I don't know who that is." "Then let me be clear." Dr. Kang's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "Kim Taesun is the heir to one of the most powerful conglomerate families in South Korea. He is also the head of an underground syndicate that controls diamond, gold, and petroleum operations across Asia. He is a man who has killed for far less than this embarrassment. This was his last viable sperm sample after cancer treatment. It was meant for a carefully selected surrogate. Instead, it went to you." Zariah felt numb, detached, like she was watching this happen to someone else. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying you need to get on a plane. Tomorrow. Terminate the pregnancy. Accept our settlement. And never speak of this again." "And if I don't?" The silence on the other end was arctic. "Then I pray for you, Ms. Bennett. Because when Kim Taesun learns what happened, he won't care that you're innocent. He'll only care that you carry his heir. And he will take what belongs to him, by any means necessary. The line went dead. Zariah sat in the dark of her apartment, phone still pressed to her ear, listening to the dial tone like it was a funeral dirge. Outside, the November wind howled. And in Seoul, a man who'd never learned to love was about to discover that fate didn't care about his plans. Kim Taesun learned about the mistake at exactly 3:47 a.m. Seoul time. He was in his office on the 42nd floor of the Kim Dynasty headquarters, reviewing shipping manifests for a petroleum shipment that would move through Jakarta. Numbers, routes, payments, everything had to be perfect in his world. Perfect meant invisible. Invisible meant survival. His phone lit up. Dr. Kang's name flashed across the screen. Taesun answered without greeting. It's nearly 4 in the morning. We have a problem. Kang's voice was thin with fear. Taesun set down his pen, his expression unchanging. He was a man who'd learned to control his face before he learned to control his empire. 34 years old, tall and lean with the kind of sharp features that made people look twice. Strong jaw, dangerous eyes, black hair that fell just past his collar in a way that was both elegant and slightly wild. He wore a black suit. Always black. It hid bloodstains better. What kind of problem? The insemination. There was an administrative error with the clinic charts. The surrogate we selected, Mississippi Park, she didn't receive your sample. Taesun's fingers stilled on his desk. Then who did? An American tourist. African-American woman, 26 years old, a mathematician from West Virginia. She came in for a routine checkup. The charts were switched. She was inseminated by mistake. For 3 full seconds Kim Taesun said nothing. Then, you're telling me my last viable sperm sample is inside a random American woman? Yes. And the pregnancy? Confirmed. She took a test. She contacted the clinic. I spoke with her an hour ago. Taesun stood slowly, moved to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seoul's glittering nightscape. The city sprawled beneath him like a kingdom he'd conquered and caged. Where is she now? Still in America. I offered her compensation and termination. She refused to commit. She's frightened, angry, unpredictable. Then make her predictable. Taesun, if we push too hard she could go public. This could destroy your family's reputation. The illegitimate heir story, the syndicate connections. The media would. I don't care about the media. Taesun's voice was ice. That child is mine. My bloodline. The only heir I will ever have. If she's carrying my son, she doesn't get to choose what happens next. And if it's a girl? Then we handle it. But first, I need to know everything about Zariah Bennett. Every detail. Every debt. Every weakness. He hung up. Taesun stood at the window for a long moment, his reflection ghostly in the glass. Behind him, his office was a study in minimalism, black leather, chrome, nothing personal except a single photograph on his desk. His mother and father, young and smiling before the cancer. Before the miscarriages. Before the weight of dynasty crushed the joy from their faces. They wanted him to produce an heir. To continue the Kim bloodline. He tried. God, he tried. 9 surrogates. 9 failures. And now, by sheer cosmic cruelty, his last chance was inside a woman he'd never met, 6,000 miles away, who had every right to hate him. Taesun picked up his phone again. Book me a flight to West Virginia. Private jet. I leave in 3 hours. Because Kim Taesun had learned one truth in his brutal life. If you wanted something done right, you did it yourself. And no one, not doctors, not laws, not oceans, would keep him from his heir. Zariah spent the next 2 days in a fog of panic and research. She called a lawyer in Charleston. Explained the situation. Listened to the lawyer's sharp intake of breath. This is medical malpractice on an international scale. You'd have a strong case, but fighting a Korean medical corporation? The legal fees alone would bankrupt you. And if this man is as connected as you say, what are you telling me? I'm telling you to be very, very careful, Ms. Bennett. She hung up feeling more trapped than before. She called Suyin. Z, oh my God. Oh my God. The Kim Dynasty? Do you know who they are? I know they're rich. Rich? Suyin's laugh was borderline hysterical. They're untouchable. The family has been in power for 3 generations. Old money, new money, blood money. Kim Taesun is. She paused. I've never met him, but I've heard stories. They call him the Ice King. He took over the family business at 25 after his father had a stroke. Turned it into an empire. But the rumors, the illegal operations, the people who cross him and just Vanish. You're scaring me. Good. You should be scared. If he's coming for that baby, I don't even know if I want to keep it. Zariah's voice cracked. This wasn't my choice, Suyin. They put this inside me without asking. I'm a virgin, was a virgin. I haven't even been on a date in 2 years, and now I'm pregnant with some mafia king's baby? What are you going to do? Zariah stared at the ceiling of her apartment, tears tracking down her temples. I don't know. But the universe decided for her. On the 3rd day there was a knock at her door. Zariah froze. It was 9 p.m. She wasn't expecting anyone. She crept to the peephole. A man stood in the hallway. Tall, dressed in a dark suit that probably cost more than her car. Black hair, sharp features, expression unreadable. Behind him 2 more men. Broader. Harder. The kind of men who broke things for a living. Her heart seized. She knew who he was before he spoke. Ms. Bennett. His voice carried through the door, accented but clear. My name is Kim Taesun. I believe we need to talk about your pregnancy. Zariah backed away from the door, hands shaking. Go away. I'm not here to hurt you. I just want to talk. You flew from Korea to West Virginia to talk? Pause. Then, almost amused, I'm a very dedicated conversationalist. I don't want your money. I don't want anything from you. Just leave me alone. Ms. Bennett, I'm going to be very honest with you. That child you're carrying is the only biological heir I will ever have. I don't leave. I don't give up. And I don't lose. So you can open this door or I can open it myself. But we are going to talk. Tonight. Zariah's mind raced. She could call the police. But what would she say? What could they do against a man like this? Her hand moved to the deadbolt. She opened the door 6 inches, chain still in place. Kim Taesun stood there, and even through the gap, his presence was overwhelming. He was handsome in a way that felt dangerous. Sharp jaw, intense dark eyes that seemed to see through her skin to the fear beneath, hair that fell in a deliberately careless way that suggested he'd never cared about anything soft in his life. He looked at her like he was cataloging every detail. Her curly hair pulled into a messy bun. Her worn college sweatshirt. Her bare feet on cheap linoleum. Ms. Bennett. How did you find me? I find everyone. That's not an answer. A ghost of something crossed his face. Amusement, maybe, or respect. You're carrying my child. I have resources. It wasn't difficult. I don't even know if I'm keeping it. His expression hardened. Then we definitely need to talk. Zariah wanted to slam the door. Wanted to call the cops. Wanted to wake up from this nightmare. Instead she unhooked the chain. Because deep down she knew running was pointless. And Kim Taesun didn't waste time on people who ran. He stepped inside, and Zariah's crappy apartment suddenly felt very small. Taesun's men stayed in the hallway. He came in alone and somehow that was worse. He moved through her space like he was cataloging it. The sagging couch, the kitchen table covered in bills and printouts about international medical law, the laptop still open to pregnancy forums. His eyes lingered on the pregnancy test, still sitting on the coffee table where Zariah had left it like a grenade with the pin pulled. You kept it. Evidence, Zariah said, arms crossed. In case I need to sue your doctor friend. Taesun turned to face her fully. Up close, he was even more overwhelming, tall enough that she had to tilt her head back, carrying himself with the kind of coiled danger that made her prey instincts scream. Dr. Kong made a mistake. He'll pay for it. But that's not why I'm here. Then why are you here? To make you an offer. I don't want your money. Everyone wants money, Ms. Bennett. They just pretend they don't until the number gets high enough. He stepped closer. But I'm not here to bribe you. I'm here to propose something more permanent. Zariah's back hit the wall. I'm not giving you my baby. Our baby. There is no our. This was an accident. A violation. I didn't choose this. Neither did I. His voice was quiet, but there was steel underneath. I spent 2 years fighting cancer. Lost half my 20s to hospital rooms and treatments that left me hollowed out. The doctors told me I'd likely never have children naturally. So I froze samples. Spent a decade building my empire thinking I had time. Then my parents started demanding an heir. So I tried surrogates. 9 times. 9 failures. He moved closer still until Zariah could smell his cologne. Something dark and expensive, cedar and smoke. That sample you carry? It was my last chance. My only chance. So no, Ms. Bennett, I didn't choose this either. But here we are. Zariah's breath came shallow. What do you want from me? Carry the child to term. Let me be part of its life. In return, I'll give you everything, security, resources, a life beyond this. He gestured at her apartment with something like disdain. I have a life. You have debt and a waitress job. I'm offering you freedom. Freedom? Zariah laughed, sharp and bitter. You're offering me a cage. A golden one maybe, but still a cage. Taesun's jaw tightened. I'm offering you a choice. No. You're telling me what you want and expecting me to comply because you're used to people being terrified of you. Something flickered in his eyes, surprise maybe, like he wasn't used to being challenged. Are you? Terrified of me? Zariah met his gaze, even though everything in her screamed to look away. I'm terrified of a lot of things right now, but mostly I'm angry. You flew here thinking you could control the situation. Control me. Like I'm just another problem you can throw money at until it disappears. That's not what I didn't ask for this. Her voice broke. I went to a clinic for a routine checkup. I was a virgin. Do you understand that? I had plans, Taesun. I had a whole life mapped out. And then some doctor's mistake turned me into, she gestured helplessly at her stomach. This. For a long moment, Taesun said nothing. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. Not kind, Kim Taesun didn't do kindness, but less sharp. I know what it's like to have your body betray you. To lose control. When I was diagnosed with cancer at 24, I thought I was dying. Every treatment, every surgery, it was a reminder that I wasn't invincible. That some things can't be bought or controlled. He paused. I'm not asking you to forgive this. I'm asking you to let me fix it. You can't fix this. There's no fixing this. Then let me try. Zariah searched his face for deception, manipulation, threat. But all she saw was exhaustion. The kind of bone-deep tiredness that came from fighting too many battles alone. What exactly are you proposing? Taesun exhaled slowly. Come back to Seoul with me. Not permanently, not yet. Just for a few weeks. Let my doctors monitor the pregnancy. Make sure everything is healthy. Let us figure this out together. Together? We're strangers. For now. And if I say no? His expression hardened again. Then I'll respect your choice. But know this, Ms. Bennett, I will not abandon my child. If you keep this pregnancy, I will be part of its life. Whether you're in Seoul or West Virginia, whether you like me or hate me, I will be there. That's not a threat. It's a promise. Zariah wanted to tell him to leave. To get out and never come back. But she looked at the bills on her table. The eviction notice she'd been ignoring. The job she hated and the debt that never stopped growing. And she thought about the thing growing inside her. This impossible, unwanted miracle. I need time to think. You have until tomorrow morning. I'm staying at a hotel in Charleston. Here's my number. He pulled out a card, set it on the coffee table next to the pregnancy test. Call me when you decide. He moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, Ms. Bennett, I'm sorry this happened to you. You deserved a choice. I can't give you that back. But I can give you options. Then he was gone, the door clicking shut behind him, leaving Zariah alone with the ghost of his cologne and a decision that would change everything. She didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw two pink lines. Taesun's face. The life she'd planned dissolving like sugar in rain. At 4 a.m., she called Suyin. Did he hurt you? No. He made an offer. Zariah explained everything, the proposal, the money, Seoul. This is insane. I know. But also, maybe not entirely insane? Suyin. Hear me out. You're pregnant. That's not changing unless you terminate, and honestly that's a deeply personal choice only you can make. But if you do keep it, you can barely afford rent. Baby? Daycare, medical bills, everything? You'd be drowning. So I should go to Seoul and play house with a mafia boss? I'm not saying that. I'm saying, maybe don't dismiss it immediately. You could come stay with me again. I could help you navigate the city, the culture. And if he's serious about supporting you, that's not nothing. Zariah stared at the ceiling. I don't know if I can trust him. Then don't. Trust yourself. Feel it out. You're smart, Z. Smarter than any man who thinks he can control you. If you go to Seoul, you go on your terms. And if it doesn't feel right, you leave. Just like that. Just like that. At 7:23 a.m., Zariah called the number on the card. Taesun answered on the first ring. Ms. Bennett. I'll come to Seoul. But I have conditions. I'm listening. I stay with my friend, not you. I control my own medical care, your doctors can monitor, but I have final say on everything. And I can leave anytime I want. No locks, no guards, no cages. Pause. Then, Agreed. Just like that. I told you, Ms. Bennett. I don't lose. But I also don't win by breaking my opponent. I win by making them see that working together is the better option. I'm not your opponent. No. His voice softened almost imperceptibly. You're not. When do we leave? My jet is fueled. We can leave tonight. Zariah closed her eyes. I'll meet you at the Charleston airport. 6 p.m. I'll send a car. I'll drive myself. Another pause, then something that might have been a laugh. Of course you will. The line went dead. Zariah sat in the morning light of her crappy apartment and wondered if she was making the biggest mistake of her life. Or if somehow, impossibly, she was choosing the only path that made sense. Seoul at night was a different animal than Seoul as a tourist. Taesun's world wasn't neon-lit cafes and palace tours. It was penthouse suites and private meetings, whispered conversations in back rooms of restaurants where the menus had no prices. Zariah stayed with Suyin just as she demanded. But Taesun was there every day. Doctor's appointments. Ultrasounds. Blood work. At 8 weeks they saw the heartbeat. Zariah stared at the screen, at that tiny flicker of motion, and felt something crack open inside her chest. Taesun stood beside her, perfectly still, his hand gripping the edge of the examination table so hard his knuckles went white. That's... He didn't finish the sentence. The doctor smiled. That's your baby. Healthy, strong heartbeat. Everything looks perfect. Zariah couldn't breathe. Couldn't think past that rhythmic pulse. Real. It was real. Taesun walked her out of the clinic in silence. His driver waited by a black sedan, but Taesun waved him off. Walk with me. They walked through Gangnam, past glittering storefronts and sidewalks full of people who had no idea that the man beside them controlled half the underground economy in Asia. I didn't expect to feel anything, Taesun said finally. Zariah glanced at him. What? The heartbeat. I thought it would be clinical. A means to an end. My heir. My legacy. He stopped walking, turned to face her. But when I saw it, when I heard it, all I could think was that's my child. Not my heir. My child. Zariah's throat tightened. I know what you mean. Do you? He stepped closer. Because I've spent 34 years learning how to not feel. How to make decisions based on logic and strategy. How to be what my family needed, ruthless, calculating, cold. But that heartbeat. He shook his head. I wasn't prepared for it. Neither was I. They stood there on a Seoul sidewalk, two strangers bound by biology and mistake, and for the first time, Zariah saw something other than calculation in Kim Taesun's eyes. She saw fear. What if I'm like my father? He said quietly. What if I can't love this child the way it deserves? Why do you think that? Because I've killed people, Zariah. I've made decisions that ended lives. I've built my empire on blood and fear, and I don't know how to be anything else. Zariah should have been horrified. Should have run. Instead she said, then learn. It's not that simple. Nothing about this is simple. But that heartbeat? That's not your dynasty. That's not your empire. That's a person. Our person. And maybe neither of us is ready. Maybe we're both terrified. But we show up anyway. Taesun searched her face. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone easier to control. Zariah laughed despite herself. Then you should have read my file better. I don't do well with being told what to do. I'm starting to realize that. Something shifted between them in that moment. Not love, not yet. But understanding. The beginning of something that might, against all odds, become partnership. But peace never lasted in Kim Taesun's world. 3 weeks after the ultrasound, everything went to hell. Taesun's family demanded a meeting. His mother, his father, the board members who controlled the legitimate side of the Kim Dynasty. You need to marry her, his mother said, her voice sharp with judgment. They sat in the family estate, a sprawling compound in Gangnam where old money and older traditions held court. Zariah wasn't there. Taesun had insisted on facing his family alone. I'm not marrying someone I barely know, Taesun said evenly. She's carrying your heir. His father's voice was weak from his stroke, but still commanding. An illegitimate child? The media will destroy us. The shareholders. The shareholders can learn to adapt. Taesun. His mother leaned forward. This American woman, what do you even know about her? Her background, her family, her intentions. I know she didn't ask for any of this. I know she's smarter than half the people in this room. And I know that forcing her into a marriage will only push her away. Then what do you propose? I propose we give her time. Let her adjust to Seoul, to me, to this situation. If we push too hard. The door burst open. Dr. Kong stumbled in, face pale, and Taesun knew immediately something was catastrophically wrong. What happened? It's Miss Bennett. There's been a complication. Taesun was moving before Kong finished speaking, his family's protests fading behind him as he ran. Zariah was at the hospital, Suyin beside her, when Taesun arrived. She was conscious but terrified, her hand pressed to her stomach. What happened? Taesun demanded, his composure cracking. Bleeding, Suyin said, voice shaking. She called me, said she was cramping, and then, there was blood. A doctor appeared, young, efficient. Mr. Kim. Ms. Bennett is stable, but she's experiencing placental bleeding. We need to monitor her closely. The pregnancy is still viable, but the next 48 hours are critical. Zariah's eyes found Taesun's. I'm sorry. I don't know what I did wrong. You did nothing wrong. Taesun crossed to her bedside, and for the first time since they'd met, he touched her. His hand covered hers, warm and solid. Nothing. Do you hear me? But the baby is still here. Still fighting. Just like you. The doctor cleared her throat. We'd like to keep Ms. Bennett overnight for observation. Bed rest for the next week, minimum. No stress, no travel. She'll have the best care, Taesun said, his voice leaving no room for argument. Private room. Whatever she needs. Taesun, I can't afford. I'm not asking. His eyes met hers, fierce and protective in a way that made her chest tighten. This is my child. You are carrying my child. Money is not a concern. Your health is the only thing that matters. Zariah wanted to argue. Wanted to maintain her independence. But she was scared. Terrified. And having someone strong beside her, someone who seemed willing to fight the entire world to keep this pregnancy safe, it made her feel less alone. Okay, she whispered. Taesun stayed. All night he stayed. Suyin eventually left to get clothes and supplies, but Taesun remained in the chair beside Zariah's hospital bed, laptop open but mostly ignored, his attention constantly drifting to the monitors tracking her vitals and the baby's heartbeat. Around 3 a.m., Zariah woke from fitful sleep to find him watching her. You should go home, she said softly. I'm fine here. Taesun. I lost 9 chances before you, Zariah. His voice was raw, stripped of its usual control. 9 women who carried my hope and lost it. I sat in hospital rooms just like this, watching test results come back negative, watching doctors deliver bad news with sympathetic faces. I told myself I wouldn't get attached. That this was business. Biology. Nothing more. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. But that heartbeat, your face when you saw it, the way you put your hand on your stomach when you're nervous like you're already protecting them. He shook his head. I can't lose this. I can't lose you both. You barely know me. I know enough. What do you know? He smiled, tired and genuine. I know you're stubborn as hell. That you put hot sauce on everything, even hospital food. That you stress calculate math problems when you're anxious. I've seen you doing equations on your phone at 2 a.m. I know you call your mother every Sunday even though the conversations are difficult because family matters to you. I know you're terrified but you show up anyway. That's bravery, Zariah. Real bravery. Her eyes stung. How do you know all that? I pay attention. That's creepy. Probably. He reached out, hesitated, then gently brushed a curl away from her face. But I'm a man who gets what he wants. And what I want is for you and this baby to be safe. Everything else is negotiable. Zariah's breath caught. His hand was still near her face, warm and careful. What if this doesn't work? She whispered. What if I lose the baby anyway? Then we grieve together. And we figure out what comes next. Together. We're not together, Taesun. Aren't we? His eyes held hers. Maybe not in the traditional sense. But we're bound now. By this child. By this impossible situation. By the fact that when you bleed, I feel it. When you're scared, I want to burn down whatever's causing it. That's not love. No, he agreed. It's not. Not yet. But it's something. And I'm not walking away from it. Zariah shouldn't have felt safe with this man. This killer, this criminal, this stranger. But in that hospital room, with machines beeping and Seoul glittering beyond the window, she did. Stay, she said. I'm not going anywhere. The bleeding stopped by morning. The baby's heartbeat remained strong. The doctors called it a miracle. Taesun called it fate. Zariah called it terrifying luck. She spent a week on bed rest at Suyin's apartment, and Taesun visited every day. Sometimes with food from expensive restaurants. Sometimes with books she'd mentioned liking. Once with a mathematician's biography that made her cry because how did he remember her saying she loved reading about Maryam Mirzakhani? "You're trying to buy me," she accused one afternoon, half joking. "I'm trying to know you," he corrected, settling into the chair he'd claimed as his. "There's a difference." "Is there?" "One is transactional. The other is—" He paused, searching for words. "Investment. I'm not a stock." "No. You're far more valuable." Zariah threw a pillow at him. He caught it with a grin that transformed his face from dangerous to devastating. "You smiled?" she said, surprised. "I do that occasionally. Could have fooled me. Most people make me want to smile less. You make me want to try." Something warm bloomed in Zariah's chest. Dangerous and unwanted and undeniably real. She was falling for him. God help her, she was falling for Kim Taesun. At 12 weeks they went for another ultrasound. The technician moved the wand over Zariah's barely there bump, and the screen came alive with movement. "There," the technician said, smiling. "Strong heartbeat. Good growth." "And," she paused, angling the wand, "would you like to know the sex?" Zariah looked at Taesun. He looked at her. "Yes," they said simultaneously. "It's a boy." Silence. Then Taesun's hand found Zariah's, gripping tight, and when she glanced at him, there were tears on his face. Actual tears. "A son?" he whispered. Zariah squeezed his hand back. "A son." And in that moment, everything changed. This wasn't about duty or dynasty anymore. This wasn't about heirs or mistakes. This was about a little boy who would have his father's sharp features and his mother's stubborn heart. A little boy who was already loved beyond measure. "He needs a name," Zariah said as they left the clinic. "In Korea we often wait until after birth to name children. But we can choose an English name now if you'd like." "What about something that works in both languages?" Taesun considered. "Jean. It means precious in Korean. In English it's simple, strong. Jean Kim Bennett." "Perfect." They walked through the city and for the first time, it felt like they were a unit. Not two strangers forced together but partners. Parents. Family. But happiness in Taesun's world came with a price. The threat arrived at 16 weeks. A text message. Anonymous number. Sent to both Taesun and Zariah simultaneously. A photo of Zariah leaving Suyin's apartment. Below it, the American whore and the bastard heir. How much is their silence worth? Taesun went nuclear. Within an hour he had his security team tracing the message. Within 2 hours he'd identified the sender, a rival syndicate leader named Park Min-suk who'd been trying to undermine the Kim Dynasty for years. "He's trying to extort you," Zariah said, fear making her voice shake. They were in Taesun's penthouse, the first time she'd agreed to come to his personal space. It was all floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist elegance, but right now it felt like a war room. "He's not trying to extort me. He's trying to hurt me by threatening you." Taesun paced like a caged animal. "This is my fault. I should have anticipated this. Should have protected you better." Taesun. "No." He turned to her, eyes blazing. "You and Jean are targets now because of me. Because I couldn't walk away. Because I'm selfish and I wanted—" He stopped himself. "Wanted what?" "You." The word exploded out of him. "I wanted you. From the moment you opened that door in West Virginia with fire in your eyes, refusing to be afraid of me, I wanted you. Not just the baby. And now Park knows it. Knows that hurting you would destroy me." Zariah stood slowly, hand protective over her stomach. "Then we fight back." "We? Did you think I was going to run? Hide?" She crossed to him. "I'm carrying your son, Taesun. Your heir. You think I'm going to let some asshole threaten my baby?" A smile ghosted across his face despite the danger. "You're incredible." "I'm pissed off. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Stop quoting me back at myself." He reached for her, cupped her face in both hands. "I'm going to handle Park. But I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" Zariah searched his eyes. Saw the killer there. Saw the man who'd sat beside her hospital bed all night. Saw the father who'd cried at an ultrasound. "Yes." "Then I need you somewhere safe while I work. Somewhere Park can't reach you." "Where?" "My family estate. It's a fortress. My parents will welcome you. Despite their concerns, they'd never let anything happen to you or Jean. And you? I'll come back to you. I promise." "Taesun." He kissed her. It was sudden and fierce and desperate, his mouth claiming hers like a man drowning. Zariah gasped, hands fisting in his shirt, and kissed him back with everything she had. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Taesun pressed his forehead to hers. I will burn the world down before I let anyone hurt you. Do you understand? I understand. Good. The next 48 hours were a blur of controlled chaos. Zariah moved to the Kim estate where Taesun's mother, an elegant woman named Kim Yuna who'd clearly mastered the art of polite disapproval, welcomed her with cool courtesy. You're carrying my grandson, Yuna said simply. That makes you family. Everything else we'll figure out. Taesun disappeared into the shadows of Seoul's underworld. Zariah tried not to think about what he was doing. Tried not to imagine the violence, the blood, the darkness. But on the second night, Suyun visited with news. It's all over the underground networks, she whispered. Park Min-suk's operations are crumbling. Someone's been systematically dismantling his supply chains, turning his allies, freezing his accounts. They're saying it's like watching a precision execution. Is Taesun okay? No one's seen him. But if Park is smart, he'll surrender before Taesun finds him. Park wasn't smart. On the third night, Taesun came home. Zariah was in the estate's library, trying to read but mostly pacing when she heard the commotion. Voices. Running footsteps. She rushed to the entrance hall. Taesun stood there, suit disheveled, a cut above his eyebrow but alive. Oh. Their eyes met across the marble floor. Then Zariah was running, propriety be damned, and throwing herself into his arms. He caught her, held her tight, buried his face in her hair. It's done, he murmured. Park won't threaten you again. What did you do? What I had to. What I'll always do to keep you safe. She pulled back, searched his face. Are you okay? I am now. His mother appeared, took one look at them and sighed. Taesun. Take her upstairs. You both need rest. We'll discuss the details tomorrow. Taesun didn't argue. He led Zariah through the estate to a private suite she hadn't seen before. His rooms, she realized. You don't have to, she started. I need to be near you tonight. Please. They lay together on his massive bed, still clothed, her back to his chest, his hands spread protective over her stomach where Jean slept. I was terrified, she admitted quietly, that you wouldn't come back. I'll always come back to you. Promise. Promise. She turned in his arms, studied his face in the moonlight streaming through the windows. I think I'm falling in love with you. His breath caught. You think? I know. But it's terrifying. You're terrifying. This whole situation is insane. I know. But when you're not here, nothing feels right. And when you hold me like this, I feel safe. Home. Taesun kissed her forehead, tender and reverent. I fell for you weeks ago. Maybe that first night in West Virginia when you refused to be intimidated. Maybe at the first ultrasound when you looked at that heartbeat like it was the most precious thing in the world. I don't know when. I just know that somewhere between strangers in this moment you became mine. And I became yours. What do we do now? Now. He smiled against her skin. We build something real. Not because we have to. Because we want to. At 20 weeks, Zariah felt Jean kick for the first time. She was sitting in the estate garden with Taesun's mother, discussing nursery colors of all things, when it happened. A flutter, then a distinct jab against her ribs. Oh my God. Yuna looked up sharply. What is it? He's kicking. Yuna's face transformed. May I? Zariah nodded, and the elegant matriarch placed her hand on Zariah's stomach, waiting. Jean kicked again, strong and sure. Yuna's eyes filled with tears. He's real. My grandson is real. He is. I owe you an apology, Zariah. I judged you unfairly. Assumed you were after my son's money, his name. But watching you these past weeks, the way you care for yourself and this baby, the way you stood beside Taesun through danger without flinching, you're stronger than any woman he could have chosen. I didn't choose this, Mrs. Kim. No. But you're choosing him now. Choosing this family. That takes courage. When Taesun came home that evening, Zariah pulled his hand to her stomach without a word. They waited. Jean kicked right against his father's palm. Taesun's face crumpled. He dropped to his knees, pressed his forehead to Zariah's stomach, and whispered something in Korean that Zariah didn't understand but felt in her soul. What did you say? He looked up, eyes wet. I promised him I'd be better than my father. That I'd love him more than the dynasty. That he'd never have to earn my affection. It was his by birthright. Zariah ran her fingers through his hair, heart-breaking and healing at once. He's lucky to have you. We're lucky to have each other. At 28 weeks, Taesun asked her to marry him. Not in a grand gesture. Not with a ring and roses. They were in his penthouse. Zariah sprawled on his couch in sweatpants because formal clothes no longer fit her expanding belly, eating ice cream straight from the container while Taesun worked on his laptop. "Marry me," he said, not looking up from his screen. "What? Marry me? Make this official. Make us a family in every way. That's possibly the worst proposal in history." He closed his laptop, turned to face her fully. "You're right. Let me try again." He stood, crossed to her, and dropped to one knee. "Zariah Bennett, you are the most stubborn, brilliant, infuriating woman I've ever met. You've challenged me at every turn. Made me question everything I thought I knew about love and family and what it means to be vulnerable. You've carried my son through danger and stress with grace and fierce protection. You've made me want to be better. Not for the dynasty. Not for my family. For you. For Jean. For us." He pulled a ring from his pocket. Simple, elegant, a black diamond that caught the light like captured starlight. "I can't promise you easy. My world is dark and dangerous and there will be days you hate me for it. But I can promise you this, I will love you until my last breath. I will protect you and our son with everything I have. And I will spend every day trying to deserve you. Will you marry me?" Zariah's hands shook as she set down the ice cream. "Yes. Yes. Yes, you dramatic, impossible man. Yes, I'll marry you." He slipped the ring on her finger and kissed her like he was starving and she was oxygen. When they broke apart, she was crying and laughing. "Your mother is going to have opinions about a wedding. My mother can wait. This is about us." "When?" "Tomorrow. Next week. Whenever you're ready. Let's wait until after Jean is born. I want him at our wedding. Want him to know from the beginning that we chose each other, chose him, chose this family. Whatever you want. I want you. Just you. You have me. Always." Jean Kim Bennett was born on a rainy Seoul morning at 39 weeks. The labor was long and brutal and beautiful. Taesun stayed beside Zariah through every contraction, letting her crush his hand, whispering encouragement in Korean and English, never flinching even when she screamed that she hated him and this was all his fault. At 7:42 a.m., Jean entered the world with a lusty cry that filled the delivery room with joy. "He's perfect," the doctor said, placing him on Zariah's chest. "Absolutely perfect." Zariah looked down at her son, and felt her heart expand beyond anything she'd thought possible. He had Taesun's dark hair. Her nose. Tiny fists that waved in outrage at being expelled from his warm cocoon. "Hi, baby," she whispered, tears streaming. "Hi, Jean. We've been waiting for you." Taesun touched Jin's head with trembling fingers, and when Zariah looked up, he was crying openly. "Thank you," he breathed. "Thank you for him. For this. For choosing us. Always." They married 3 months later in a small, private ceremony at the Kim estate. Zariah wore a simple white dress that accommodated her still-recovering body. Taesun wore traditional Korean wedding attire that made him look like a prince from a historical drama. Jean slept through the entire ceremony in his grandmother's arms, blissfully unaware that his parents were cementing what had started as a mistake into something sacred. When Taesun kissed his bride, every person in the room felt the weight of their story, the impossibility, the danger, the love that had grown in the strangest soil. "Mrs. Kim," Taesun murmured against her lips. "Kim Bennett," Zariah corrected. "I'm hyphenating. My mother would kill me otherwise." "Of course you are." "Problem?" "Not even slightly." A year later, Zariah stood in the nursery of their new home, not the estate, not the penthouse, but a house they'd chosen together. Something balanced between their two worlds. Jean babbled from his crib, standing now, grinning with 4 teeth and Taesun's mischievous eyes. Taesun appeared behind her, arms wrapping around her waist. "What are you thinking about? How none of this should have worked. How every logical part of me screamed that this was a disaster waiting to happen. And I've never been happier to be wrong." He turned her in his arms, kissed her slow and deep. "We make beautiful mistakes, you and I. The best kind." Jean chose that moment to decide he was done being ignored, crying out with the imperious tone of a child who knew he was adored. They went to him together, lifted him from the crib together, laughed when he grabbed Taesun's hair with sticky fingers. "Duh," Jean announced proudly. "That's right," Taesun said, wonder in his voice even after months of hearing it. "Dada." "Say mama," Zariah encouraged. "Duh. We'll work on it." Later, after Jean was asleep and the house was quiet, Zariah found the pregnancy test she'd saved. The one that had started everything. 2 pink lines that had felt like a curse. Now they felt like fate. She tucked it into Jin's baby book, next to his hospital bracelet and first photograph. Someday when he was older, she'd tell him the story. How his parents met not through romance but through impossible chance. How love had grown in the space between fear and hope. How the best things in life often came from the most unexpected places. But for now she returned to bed where Taesun waited, pulling her close. No regrets? He asked quietly. Zariah thought about her old life. The debts, the diner, the careful plans. Then she thought about this life. The man beside her. The child down the hall. The family they'd built from chaos. Not a single one. Good. He kissed her temple. Because I love you, Zariah Kim Bennett. More than I thought possible. More than words can hold. I love you too. Even when you're dramatic and impossible. Especially then. She laughed, settled into his arms and closed her eyes. Outside, Seoul glittered in the darkness. Inside, a family slept. And somewhere in the universe, fate smiled at a mistake that had become the most beautiful truth. Thank you for joining us for this journey on Mafia love story, where fate doesn't ask permission, and the heart doesn't follow logic. Remember, the most impossible love stories often become the most unforgettable. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Because in this world, every heartbeat hides a secret, every shadow holds a story, and sometimes the greatest love grows from the most unexpected beginning. Until next time, stay dangerous, stay passionate, and never stop believing in the impossible.